we'll get started with our next session here. Just a friendly reminder again, if you don't have that link for the session surveys, please fill that out, and that's where you'll get your CEU credits. And if you have any questions, if you weren't in our last session, Dr. Mo is going to be all virtual, so she won't be able to hear you unless you have the microphone. So just raise your hand, and we'll get the microphone to you. If you're on the Whova app, just put in the question window or the live chat option, and we'll answer it there. So without further ado, Dr. Mo, go ahead.
Hello, thank you very much. So just a caveat here I gave to the last group, just so we all know, I am teaching this summer in Honolulu, Hawaii. Excuse me. And so I am single momming it. I have my 5-year-old with me. And so there might be a couple of distractions, but she has been powering through this thus far. So I'm super grateful. And I'm really happy to be with all of you today. So bear with me with a little bit of this. Hi, my name is Dr. Mo, and I'm an addict and an alcoholic. I am 4,636 days sober and 7,315 days clean. And I'm going to have you move the slide because this is the wrong meeting. So we're going to talk about today, before I really even get started with what's going on here, we're going to talk about what different addictions look like. So addictions can look like lots of different things. It can be sex, nicotine, caffeine, alcohol, food, exercise, work, shopping, porn, self-harm, or prescription drugs like sedatives, hypnotics, sleep meds, opioids, or street drugs like heroin, cocaine, hallucinogens, sugar, money, love, gaming, gambling, codependency, just to name a few, right? So even social media. So let's think about that. So now I have a couple questions for all of you, and I know that I can't see you, but I would love to get some feedback in the chat if you could, and kind of so those of you who are together can get an idea of your own situation. I'll ask you to just raise your hand if you're in person as well. So now that we went through all those things, I want you to list on that list, I want you to raise your hand if you're a person who's been personally impacted by addiction. So go ahead and raise a hand. And then if you love someone who's been impacted by addiction, I'd also like you to raise a hand or two. And if you just know someone who's been impacted by addiction, I'd like you to raise your hand. And I'm going to give a second for the chat to catch up. So if you know, love someone, or you are someone who's been personally impacted by addiction.
I'd say most are raising their hands. Oh, there we go.
Okay, awesome. Thank you for letting me know. So, you know, what this tells us about addiction is that really it does impact a lot of us, mostly all of us. I see some coming in the chat here. And because we know that, we also know that every person is different too. So based off of their experience and their life, they also heal differently too. So what worked for you, what worked for your brother, your sister, your mom, your grandpa, may not work for the next person. And we really need to remember this as they're walking through their recovery process. So I don't think the screen is up, and that's fine. But what I want you to do next is I'd like you to put your hands up to your eyes just like this. And for those of you who are together, I know this looks silly and I'm totally here for it. And I want you to take a minute to look around the things in the room, and I can see all of you, so I can tell if you're doing it or not. Go ahead and look around the things in the room. I just want you to use your lens and take a peek at the people around you. And now I'm going to let you stop being silly. But what I want you to notice is that you're looking at things through your view. And when we do that, when we use our lens, we miss out on the views of others around us. And so when we project or we express the things that we've done to heal or that have worked for us, we decrease other people's or even remove other people's ability to use what could work for them or how they could grow or what might be best for them to move forward in their recovery process. So addiction is one of the only disorders that can sometimes present itself as poor behavior. And I think we've all know that or have experienced what that looks like. And even as someone who researches addiction and somebody who's struggled with addiction themselves, we know that it's extremely hard to understand. It's extremely complex issue, as most things with humans are, right? But the one thing that we know that we can all do is just be more compassionate. And like I talked about in my last session, is we can be more compassionate with our word choices. One of the biggest reasons that people don't get help is that stigma. And societal stigma being the biggest one, and the one that we can help reduce today just by changing the way that we talk. And so I'm going to have you take a little journey with me here. it was the end of September. It was a very cold night, and we had just beat our roller derby rivals for the first time on the roller derby track. I played roller derby for a decade, and I absolutely loved the support and everything that came with it. After our game was done, we went to the bar where we always celebrated, handed out awards, and kind of did our fun little thing afterwards. We partied well into the night. We arm wrestled, we shot pool, we did all the great things. And then we went to the hotel and partied for a little bit longer there. It was a very good night. I woke up the next day not feeling great, but didn't really think much about it. I fulfilled all my obligations, got home that day, and kind of rode the couch for the rest of the evening, just watching TV. Monday morning, I wake up and I'm not feeling well. I thought, you know what, it's kind of cold outside. What if I just open the front door and I get a little bit of fresh air, and that should bust me through it. I opened the front door and I'm not sure what happened, but I passed out. I fell and onto my deck. I broke my eye socket, and I broke my nose, and I had a huge gash across my face. Once I kind of got myself back together and kind of slowed down some of the bleeding, I got a ride to the emergency room where I spent a majority of the day. They ran tests on everything, just absolutely everything that there could be, which is great, doing their job. A lady came in a couple of hours after I had been there saying, you know, not all the tests are in, but we'll kind of get you what you need. Do you need anything? Just let us know. And I said, no, I'm fine. Thank you. And she walked out the door. She closed the door, but not all the way. And on the outside, I heard another nurse say, don't worry about her. She's just an alcoholic. And so in that moment, I had a lot of realizations in that moment. One was that lady wasn't right, and I was never going to allow anyone to call me that again. And two, that my journey had come to an end, and that was going to be the last day that I drank, which is over almost 13 years ago. And that I was going to try to help people who had kind of been in my space. This was the second addiction that I had dealt with, and I knew in my heart that I could get through it because I had the support of my roller derby team. And so I made some serious changes that day, and moving forward, I wanted to be an advocate. And so here I am today, and thank you. And I want to know, when I first started and I said, you know, I'm an addict and I'm an alcoholic, did those words make you feel uncomfortable? I know if you're on my last session, you know, they make me feel uncomfortable. I really do not want to ever call myself that again, because that's not what I am. They made me feel kind of sick, actually. Even saying them today, even though I was given this presentation before, it just kind of makes me feel sick. And I'm not addiction, because I have addiction in my past does not make me addiction. It doesn't make me an addict, doesn't make me any of those things. It's somebody, I'm a human, I am a person, I am a somebody. If I had MS, you wouldn't call me multiple sclerosis, you would call me a person with MS, right? That person first language is what we can really use to decrease that stigma. And we talked about this. A person with alcohol use disorder, a person with eating disorder, a person is not clean or they're dirty, they're either using or they're abstinent. And the only thing that happens, again, when we use this language is we stigmatize other people who struggle with addictions. The slide that comes up next is a slide with a bunch of awesome people. And the one thing that all those people have in common is that they're all in recovery. There's 22 million people that are in recovery. And I'm here to tell you that we do recover. Look at all those great people. All right, so next slide, please. The last thing I really want to highlight to kind of tie everything together here, doesn't seem like it fits with what I've been talking about, which I now know, but is this idea of peer support. And peers being all of us, we're peers. We're peers supporting other people, building them up, bringing them together. But specifically, I want to talk about peer specialists. So last year I presented at this conference, and I was super amazed with the feedback that I got and the people that were interested about what I was doing in the world of peer supports, and that y'all wanted to bring me back to hear about what I've been doing in the last year. And I'm about to report that I've been doing some stuff in the last year. So I'm excited. But peer support's being this connection of people who have been there and done that in the world of recovery, or this concept that happens everywhere in all fields. So think about mentors, advocates, allies, coaches, consultants, trainers. They're all people who support other people. Or think about this hockey player that, plays hockey their whole life, gets trained to be a coach, and then mentors other hockey players along the way. Or as we call them in the addiction and behavioral healthcare field, peer specialists. So again, in short, people with lived experience and the training to be this compassionate mentor for others moving forward. So when I say that they can help them on their recovery path, what do these recovery paths look like? Well, they can look like a lot of different things. It can look like treatment. It can look like medications. It can look like therapy, support, and it can even look like remission. And I think that I would be remiss not to talk about remission. So remission or relapse, as it is formally called, happens in all sorts of disease states, right? So we know that remission can look like a lot of different things, and we know that remission can be part of the process. So when we think about all those different recovery paths that we were just talking about and how people can take all of those different paths. So say they take one, they get medical assisted treatment and addiction counseling, and then they go into remission. Okay, that's all right. That's part of the process. That journey, that path that we had for you isn't currently supporting you the way it needs to. So now we need to go back to square one. Think about other diseases. People with diabetes can have remission. They can go back into a state where they can't get their sugars into control, and they need to set up another recovery path for what it looks like. This is not any different for what it looks like for people in recovery. And so remission really is part of it. We don't want it to happen. Nobody wants it to happen, but it could happen to any and all of us if we're not staying on the path that works best for us. And sometimes that first path wasn't the right path. And so we need to come at it again. And we know that, it's crucial for us to understand and to navigate this recovery in a way that works for them. So what I want people to know is that peer supports, again, can be there for people along any portion of their path, like any piece of that recovery path. A peer support can come in and be that assistance for them and what it looks like. And they're really crucial to that care team puzzle and being part of it. So I think about, for counselors that kind of say like, hey, this is kind of my job. No, it's not. For an addiction specialist or a counselor, your job is to be very clinical. And a peer specialist can take your message and help maybe dwindle it down and keep it on a weekly basis. So, hey, remember when we talked to your addiction specialist, they told us that we want to try and work on ABC. Let's make sure that we work on A this week, B this week, C this week, whatever it looks like, right? They just amplify your clinical message moving forward. And so they really are a part of the care team in that way. Peer specialists can work independently also, and they can work online. So really whatever's best for the client. And through research, I've really found the power of this work filling the gaps. So I've been doing research on peer support for the last, it's almost 4 years now. I was trying to better understand why isn't treatment like 100% successful? Why isn't treatment the answer? What else do we need? What can we pair it with? And that's where I came across peer supports. I was working with the Department of Social Services or behavioral health. I can't quite remember at the time. And they were saying, peer support is what we need. What does it look like? And so I kind of took this dive into what does it look like? And I found peer supports and I figured out how to utilize them. And I became a peer support, and I've been doing it, and I've been researching peer supports, meeting with them, having webinars with them, I went all in. To figure out what can we do to get this piece moving forward? What can we do to get this care piece in the hands of everyone who may need it? And so again, I found them fulfilling the gaps, not only in addiction, but mental health as well. And that loved one support that we were talking about last session. In this addiction care and mental health care crisis, we know that peer supports can be a portion of the answer. We have a shortage of services in these spaces, and behavioral health care professionals, more of them are moving out of these jobs and moving into these jobs. And that's really scary, right? We need to know what we can do to help. And I'm not saying that peer supports take any of those roles, but they take a lower level role where they can be a part of the team. And for those people, the number of people that are struggling with mental health and addiction overdoses, we know it's at an all-time high. And we can add that component as if you've ever overdosed, we want you to have a peer specialist immediately kind of action. And I think the team that's working on overdose in South Dakota is on board for what that can look like. So I'm really proud of our state for that. And the moves that we've made in terms of understanding that addiction it's hitting our people. It's impacting us, and we have to do something. We can't just stand still. So again, I'd like to explain to clinicians that they're there to better understand. They're there to make the process a little bit more smooth. Peer services can be rendered online, in person, and then just really making their reach completely limitless. And the profession provides workforce development for those who may have that red check mark. So say that somebody has a felony on their record. That doesn't make them ineligible. Say somebody doesn't have a GED, that doesn't make them ineligible to be a peer support. Really, there are different markers in different spaces. In South Dakota, currently, we don't have any regulation around what it looks like, and we're working towards getting a peer association to make sure that we can just keep people safe, right? We want to be ethical, and we want to make sure that there's no HIPAA violations and that people aren't being harmed. So we do have things put in place, trainings put in place, and ways to help connect them, but we don't want to put barriers up, because somebody who sold drugs honestly could be the best dang car salesman ever, right? We just have to shift their skill set and put it somewhere else. So if somebody has navigated recovery and what it looks like, they could be the best dang person to help somebody else navigate recovery and what it looks like. So we don't want to stifle people in that area. So next slide, please. So one peer specialist can reach as many as 2,000 different people in a year's time with their services. So for me, that's mind blowing. Obviously, you probably wouldn't work with one specific person each time, but that's the possibilities with one peer specialist. So 100 peer specialists is 200,000 people that they could actively reach, and 1,000 peer specialists could potentially reach 2 million people, right? We know that we need these services to be able to help navigate this. And with the current estimate of 71 million people who are currently struggling with addiction and mental health care needs, we can see how much these services are greatly needed from that number alone. And I believe that was from 2021. So I know the numbers are increasing. I know they're not going down, which is unfortunate. In the time that I've been talking to you, there's been at least 9 non-fatal overdoses and approximately 1 fatal overdose just in the time that I've been talking to you on the screen. And so we know that we have to be doing something. We can't keep doing the same things that we're doing. We have to start implementing other processes. And as I believe that the hockey player turned coach is a wonderful mentor, we know that the evidence-based answer to fulfilling some of the gaps really is this peer specialist. And a peer specialist can decrease that stigma we were talking about in really a myriad of ways by having walked that path, by the training that they have, compassion, and their ability to be this low barrier care component. So next slide, please. So in line with Johan Hari, my call to action to each and every one of you is to be compassionate with your words. The next time you see or hear someone struggling, I challenge you to reach out to them and offer to help them find resources. We are all different, and we all want and need different things based on our lived experiences. So be patient and be caring, because I truly believe that the opposite of addiction is not sobriety, as you've heard me say, but that it is support. So I'm going to move on to some things that I've been doing to kind of give you guys an update about what's kicking here in the world of straight up care. But first, since I saw you last, next screen, please. You're welcome to hit this QR code. I wrote a book. I wrote a book with my friend, and it's a harm reduction book. And it really looks at alcohol for our first go around. The co-writer or co-author and I have both struggled with addiction issues as far as alcohol. And we thought this was a really great place for us to use harm reduction, or these common sense approaches to what it looks like to heal and help other people heal. My friend is a writer, and she's amazing and did a wonderful job taking my words and making them into a masterpiece. So this is a 66-day reset from alcohol. So again, this is not full abstinence, but we do walk you through this guided journal about what it looks like to be mindful, right? The shift mindset, like shift your mindset from what it looks like to be struggling with addiction, or maybe not even, maybe you're a gray area drinker and you're like, during COVID, I started drinking a little bit too much, and now I'm still drinking a little bit too much, and I need to figure out what I can do to regulate my drinking again, but because for some reason I can't quite do it. And so we walk you through, like, what does it look like to stop drinking? If you're in a space where it's unsafe, you need to reach out to a care provider. But if you are in a space where it's safe for you to pretty much cold turkey quit, we give you 6 days to kind of work into the process. And then you walk through this journal. How do you feel? Taking some inventory. What does it look like to be mindful? What role was alcohol playing in your life? And how does that help you navigate moving forward? What are your goals? What's your motivations? And it really just kind of takes you into the space of making time to think about what role alcohol plays And because of that, we've had some great feedback. We are so happy to be able to bring this to fruition, and we hope to spread this message to other people. We know that a lot of programs are abstinence-based, and so we might not fit the mark for what peer abstinence-based looks like. But as we know from SAMHSA and other organizations that are leaders in our field, abstinence isn't always the answer. So this is our harm reduction technique to mindfulness in alcohol use, and how we can utilize what it looks like for taking a break to really understand what role is it playing. How do I feel? Did I lose weight? Does my skin look better? You know, there's lots of good side effects to stopping drinking poison, essentially, because that's what alcohol is. And so I wanted to kind of update you all on that. That's our shift mindset, the alcohol reset, which you can get on Amazon. That's where that link heads to. I also did put it in the Hoover app. So if you decide that it's something you'd like to utilize with your clientele, or maybe even something that you're in the space to read, I suggest that you do so. All right, next, please. So this is a flashback to what was going on with Straight Up Care. So Straight Up Care was just a dream last time we met. I think we had just started. We had just made it an LLC, and we have been busy, man. We have been so busy. So Straight Up Care is this turnkey web-based platform that connects peer specialists to their clients in this one easy to use space. We have a matching algorithm that allows us to match people based off their lived experience. So my profile looks a little bit like, hi, I'm a female, I'm 40 years old, and I am in recovery for methamphetamine use, alcohol use, overworking, and other people can connect with me on those pieces. So when they make their profile, they may see my name pop up and they say, oh yeah, she might be somebody that I connect with, and they're able to click on my photo and schedule with me in that way, which I think is so cool, because what we've realized is that we need rapport, right? And having that lived experience gets a lot of rapport. So if any of you are listening that are in recovery, you've probably already connected with me on a level you don't quite understand, because we've both been through that. And that been there, done that does not have to be there in order for you to help people, but it does help for that rapport, and people feel that. I feel it. When I meet somebody who's struggled with addiction issues and they share that story with me, I'm like, I get you. Like we're on this different level. And I love that. And so we've utilized that in a way where we can use artificial intelligence to do those matching pieces for us and make sure that we can use those components moving forward. So I'm going to go to the next slide, if you will, please. So again, I want you to take a little journey with me. So a woman finds a man in his car, and he looks as if he's distressed. He has pinpoint pupils, blue lips, and he's struggling to breathe. The woman that found him calls 911 and starts CPR immediately. Luckily, she has Narcan, and the Narcan was administered. This brings his breathing back to a somewhat normal level. And shortly after, emergency medical is there and gets him to the ER where he needs to be. The man is struggling with opioid use disorder, but the ER is really packed that way and definitely does not address the issue in the way that it needed to be. So the hospital gets him in a stable condition, and then within 4 hours, he's ready to be discharged without further care. He's given a printout of addiction counselors in the area. And because of his past mistakes, he has to walk about 2 miles to his car. And he's in precipitated opioid withdrawal, but he's not sent with any other services, and his chances of recovery are truly very slim. So I want you to think about how many times this happens, right? And what could the connecting piece be? I'll have you flip to the next slide, please. So as you see on here, the recovery path, right? So we could have took this man and got him a peer support immediately, right? So he had somebody that supported him immediately. And I want you to look at the different recovery paths. So we have all the things that we talked about earlier, right? Treatment, medical assisted treatment, detox, AA, NA, or some sort of support meeting, and then that remission piece as well. So being able to connect people with a peer support that can walk through them on any path, I think is super important. And we're, again, Straight Up Care or peer supports can be this really low barrier care component. So next slide, please. So what I found through my research is really this. We have, and this has changed as I've done research since the last time we got together, is that in the wake of the addiction and mental health care crisis, we need more peer supports, right? We have a shortage of peer supports and what they look like. And we know this in South Dakota. We are so lucky to have Face It, but they can only house so many at this time, right? And so we need to keep increasing what it looks like to have more peer supports in South Dakota to reach people that they match with, if you will. And then that accessibility. How do we get all those peer supports to the people who need those services? What can that look like? And then the standards. And we talked about, what South Dakota standards are and being able to not make it so many barriers that people aren't able to do the work, but to be able to make it to where we have some standards so people don't get hurt. So what a lot of peer supports know, or what a lot of peer supports don't know that are working independently, is that not a lot of the platforms that they're using are HIPAA compliant. So I'm going to have you I'm going to have you switch to the next slide, please. So Straight Up Care, this is our solution. This is really what we've done, and I'll talk a little bit more about what our roadmap is, so you can kind of see the cool atmosphere that we've been creating. But this telehealth platform, it allows booking, payments, which is audio, call, or chat, and then it allows everything in HIPAA compliance, which they're rolling back some of during COVID. We really kind of said, oh, we know we need telehealth services. Let's just go ahead and do them. And we won't get so crazy on HIPAA, which was fabulous for what we needed it when we needed it. And not that COVID is by any means over, but we do know that we need to make sure that things are HIPAA compliant and that we're keeping people safe in that way. So we also allow the ability for us to build them a professional website, or they can build it on their own to be able to advocate for themselves and market for themselves. Education, I created a 46-hour online course to become a peer specialist, and then other CE courses like HIPAA compliance. We are waiting for our NADAC certification for this course, which should come through very soon. I'm excited about that. That was a process. And it's been really cool. I teach, if you've had me in any of my classes, you know that I teach just a little bit different. I use like the most on the cusp teaching pedagogies that you can use. I really love teaching. I do research in pedagogy, and I am a firm believer in that you taking a test does not show me that you learned, but you creating things that will make you better and that will help you with the field that you're working in or other people is what shows me that you've learned. And so the test for the course or the assignments for the course is very much this interactive, what I like to consider fun, kind of learning, this intuitive, internal learning, crisis plan building, how to share your personal story, using all of SAMHSA's core competencies in order to, and show me those in assessments that are fun. And as an online instructor, I've kind of been tasked to like, ew, online courses, they're not fun. And I'm like, that's a challenge. And that's a challenge I'm willing to try and meet. And so again, if you've had me in any courses, you know that's something that I try and work towards. So on the next slide, please. This is our Straight Up Care team. There's a couple others that are working with us behind the scenes, and we're hoping to add more. We're loving it. Jonathan Lewis is a developer, and he is amazingly skilled with creating an app, a telehealth platform. He's created so many other things that I'll talk about, but he is a gift. And then myself, some of our strategic partners or people that we've been working with are listed on there as well. And we're so blessed to be able to get the support. We won an award at the Governor's Giant Vision last month. And we've just been so grateful to have people support us in this path. The next slide, please. So I want to talk to you about where can peer supports work? Maybe you're like, where can a peer support hang out? What can they do? Where are they helping? So EAP programs, or employment assistance programs, is where we're really trying to dip into, because we feel like, they have some counseling sessions, but what would it be like if there was a peer specialist that could be able to help along those ways? Treatment centers, a care component, especially for medical assisted treatment. Medical assisted treatment has high marks, right? Like it does wonderful things, but when you pair it with a peer specialist, and I think Dr. Tumang's crew would definitely agree with this. I know sometimes they say that, oh, the client was done with their medical assisted treatment, but they're just still coming to hang out with their peer specialist. And that to me shows me something, right? Like they've created a bond. It's part of their healing and how they're working together. Mental health wellness centers, emergency medical, like we talked about with my story about the lady who Narcan's the gentleman in his car, justice impacted people. So we have been blessed with a Sioux Falls community grant to be able to implement our training program with drug court participants. And not only is the judge amazing and Noreen and Des, but we've been able to just set the stage for what we think can be super awesome. I know that sometimes, again, people with a felony or people who have been impacted by the justice system, yes, baby, are definitely have some barriers put in place, and being able to give them the skills that they may need to be able to jump into the workforce and be the expert in what they're doing, man, it makes me so happy. We are so blessed to be able to do that. And we can't wait to find ways to make that sustainable and work with all of the courts, not just drug court, but all of the problem solving courts in South Dakota to implement what this can look like. Dr. Aaron Miller and I and Dr. Ball have some grants that are on the table to hopefully get into the prison system and work with the women's prison first to implement these peer specialist trainings as well, and be able to give those women and those people impacted hopefully a good step up. And, you know, like I told the judge, I said, even if they only go through this process and go through the training with me and we learn and talk together and they don't become peer specialists, honestly, I don't mind, because I think that the skills that they'll learn and the things that will help bolster them in their own recovery are really powerful for me too. So I'm happy about it either way that it goes. All right, so the next slide, please, before I get too emotional on that. So I want to talk about like what's our unique solution? Like what are we doing? So again, we have this turnkey platform for peer specialists. So there's all sorts of telehealth platforms out there, right? We know BetterHelp, and just everything. I'm not going to go through a list of them. We know that they exist, but there is nothing currently that exists for peer specialists in this full A to Z way: training, HIPAA compliance, administrative and tools in order to reach their clients. And then being able to have this online certification, hopefully very soon in the future, being NADAC certified, makes them nationally certified to be a peer specialist, which, you know, we know people leave South Dakota, so we don't want them to just be a South Dakota peer specialist if they so choose to work further. Also, because there are no regulations currently in South Dakota, that means that peer specialists in South Dakota can work all across the United States, which is pretty cool. We can make a gigantic workforce of people who are in recovery from mental health, addiction, and loved ones. We could make this huge army of people here who are helping all across the United States. And that gives me joy too. But how is this unique for the clients? Well, they can pick their own peer specialist, like I talked about with that matching algorithm. They have the ability to book call, chat, video, text. We're working towards, I should have put our big map on here. I'm sorry, I didn't. We're working towards VR spaces. So VR in terms of like, whoa, this is me VR, and then old school, like retro VR, kind of like this 2D atmosphere to help with anonymity. So those people who are not quite ready to say, hey, I need help, can get this help in a way where they don't have to put their face on it. They don't have to put their name on it. You can also give people a gift of peer specialist sessions. So if you think that maybe your loved one needs this service, but they can't afford it, or they're not ready for it, they have these opportunities to get these services in a way that can be helpful. In the last session, we were talking about what does enabling look like, and it can look like a lot of different things like cash, right? And so this might be a way to get them services that they wouldn't get for themselves, and help them in a way that shows that you love them without saying, well, this worked for me, or you should do this, or you should do that, because we know that doesn't help. And sometimes just loving them is hard. Sometimes loving people who struggle with addiction is very hard. And we've also created a Roku and Amazon Fire channel based on being able to break stigma, reduce the stigma. So we have a video channel right now that has videos that people have created about their own story. And we think that'll help break some of those walls down. You know, in my last session, we were talking about how do we reduce stigma? Well, one way is for people like me and anybody who looks and sounds like me, in terms of recovery, to talk about what it looked like to go through their recovery. And so we've created this Amazon and Roku Fire channel that will come out here in just a couple of months, for people who want to share their story, who want to break the stigma, who want to talk about what it's like to be a peer specialist. And if that fits the mark for you, reach out to me and I can show you what that can look like. So the next slide, if you would, please. So the one thing I want to talk about is peer supports. Kind of the biggest thing that we see is this DIY peer support. And so although that's great, right? You can get all the things that we're talking about. You can get a scheduling app, you can get Zoom, you can get a Google phone number, you can do all these things. But where Straight Up Care has tried to seal some of those gaps is that HIPAA compliance. So we were talking really about if a peer support does use that scheduling app and a space to take notes and a Google phone number and the free Zoom, that's wonderful, but it's not HIPAA compliant. A Google number is not HIPAA compliant. The free Zoom is not HIPAA compliant. And so we want to make sure that we educate people and keep them safe in that way. Like I said, HIPAA compliance is our utmost. And then move on to the next slide here, please. So here's our Straight Up Care timeline. So in April, we had our pre-launch, and then May, just a couple of days ago, we had our full launch to the site. And we have started onboarding peer specialists, which seems great, right? I'm super stoked. My emails are busy, and I'm happy. I'm happy to know that people need what we've created and that they're excited about it. So in June, we'll roll out the full matching algorithm, and just to kind of help, like I said, with that rapport. And then in August, hopefully, we will launch the Amazon and Roku Fire channel. Moving to the desktop accessible VR. So the VR that Jonathan has created, you don't have to have an Oculus headset or some other sort of headset. You can really just use it through your desktop and be able to meet in those ways. And we want to get into this more immersive VR space. We know that other medical advancements are moving into VR, and addiction haven't really met that mark about what wearables can look like, what VR can look like. What are the genetic markers, and kind of getting into more, for lack of a better term, the nerdy side of what things look like. How can we use this AI? How can we use what we know is available for VR and this understanding to meet the mark for people who are struggling with addiction? As we've talked about, currently, we know it's happening. We know it's there. We know we need help, but what are we doing to reach those marks? And kind of, we've shifted once we get this going, we've kind of shifted our view to how can we keep helping? What can we keep doing? What can we try? What trials can we do? What things can we do to implement that? I'm going to have you go ahead and switch to the next slide here. So here's a couple of QR codes. They work. It's exciting. Feel free to QR code them. So Syndicate 12 is something that we've also created, not only for peer supports, but a need that we saw that needed to be filled. So Syndicate 12 is essentially like a social media platform, if you will, for people who are in recovery. And this is also for contingency management. So if the term contingency management makes you feel any sort of way other than happy, I want you to think about why it makes you feel like that. Contingency management is best practices. It's been shown to work, and I think it's phenomenal. And so we created a platform that implements it. So we use a little bit of gamification inside of our Syndicate 12 to be able to help people reestablish dopamine. If you are someone who struggled with addiction, you know that your dopamine center is very off balance. And if you are a researcher, even somebody who's helped people with addiction, you know that the dopamine is really off. So being able to reestablish that good dopamine. So when you are in Syndicate 12 and you share a link or you post something that is good, that helps other people, right? Or if you invite people, if you have a meeting inside Syndicate 12, you can have Zoom meetings, video meetings inside Syndicate 12, inside your group. So we say 12 because we want 12 people in your immediate circle that you could reach out to. If at 1 a.m. you were struggling, who could you reach out to? Your Syndicate 12, your 12 people. But then you can have these larger groups. You can have meetings. You could run a support group meeting through there via video, via chat, and then be able to utilize all those functions to help other people navigate what that looks like too. And there's lots of bells and whistles in there for you to be able to find a space that keeps you healthy and a place that kind of just is for people in recovery. So the contingency management piece, Dr. Erin Miller and I have been working on to have tangible contingency management prizes, if you will. So if you've done so many things like stayed on your recovery path, you have shared some things, you've invited some people, you've went to a meeting. And when I say meeting, I just mean like meeting with other people who are in recovery. You might get 1,000 points or whatever that looks like, some nominal. If that happens, then you can go into the store and you can pick your contingency management piece. And so we're working to try and find people in the area, in areas, I should say, that will also help. So maybe it's a local pizza shop or another place where you can go that you're not enticed to drink, right? So it might be a coffee shop, a pizza shop, or this or that other thing that will donate back to this community. So a lot of times in recovery, people get very isolated and they forget how to be part of their community. And we hope that this will help with that. So they may give gift certificates for coffee or gift certificates for pizza, and that is something that you could utilize. Or with the work of Dr. Miller, she has solidified some, like I said, tangible prizes, so they could get that and it'll be mailed to them. Just being able to utilize what contingency management looks like in this self-motivated process that we've not really seen before. So also doing research on this to understand how does this work when people are using contingency management personally. What does that look like for them, and how can we utilize that? So if this is something that you get excited about, you can reach out to me or Dr. Miller about this as well. If it's something that you want utilized in your treatment center or your mental health center, we'll see if that fits into Dr. Miller's grant and how we can make that happen as well. But we're really excited about what that can look like. Just another space for people to get support. And as we've talked about, support is the key, right? Or at least my message that I'm bringing to you today. On the other side is the reduce the stigma. And this will take you to that video space that allows people to share their personal stories. There's not a terribly ton of amount of stuff up there now. We have stories that are running through the mill, getting them processed so they can get up there. But if this is something that you're interested in, or you have people that you're like, oh, they love spreading their message, give them this link, let them know that there's a space for what this could look like. And I think we can flip to the next slide. So if anything I've talked to you about today is of interest to you, if there's something that you're like, wow, this is a thing I would like to get involved with, or the grant program that you're talking about is something that I want to do or apply for, or a peer support could be implemented in our setting, or what that could look like. We have a meeting coming up that you can hit the QR code for this on June 22nd at 6 p.m. and that's Central Standard Time. You can share it with other people who might be interested in straight up care, what it could look like, or just reach out to me if you really have any questions. I'm happy to utilize that. So we can flip to the next slide. Almost done, baby. All right, so the next thing I want to say is thank you, first of all, but I wanted to give an ample amount of time for questions and comments and concerns, and just like anything that this conversation brought up, I want to give time for that. So I left a little bit more time for us to be able to communicate together, because that's what I think is the most important. So I would like to now open it up to questions, comments.
Got one?
Thanks again for your presentation. My question is in relation to some of the stigma that exists about peer support specialists, maybe kind of the lack of standardization that you talked about trying to address. This idea, I think that's a, misunderstanding about, oh, if you have two people that are in recovery together, they're going to use more and it will lead down a bad path. So if you could just speak about kind of some ways that we can help people challenge those ideas. What does research say about peer support specialists, and kind of looking at it from that perspective?
Yeah, absolutely. Another great question. Thank you. So yeah, it's definitely SAMHSA has core competencies for what best practices look like for peer supports. And we've been seeing a lot of great improvement in services by adding this component and piece. And I have, I've heard the same thing kind of that you said, well, what if, two people go into remission at the same time together? What can that look like? Well, yeah, what if? Things do happen. We know that things could happen, but we also know that being able to have that support and navigate, knowing that they're on the same page, working towards the same goal, is what we should really be focusing on based off of the other thing. I think the biggest kickback I really get is the clinicians that are like, I'm already doing this. This is not a space. We don't need somebody else. I went to school for 4 years, and it's not matching that. It's not at all taking up an addiction counselor space or a mental health therapist space. It's really to add another component. And like I said, that lower barrier. So I think it's just amplifying the message of it is a care component that needs to be added, because there is research that says it is best practices, especially with medical assisted treatment.
One question from the Hoover app. Are any of these platforms or the links you shared, are they going to be apps, or are they apps currently?
So the telehealth platform is an app currently. The Syndicate 12 is something that you can utilize through your phone, but it's not an app at the moment. I just kind of saved it to my my home screen as a link, and that's how I utilize it as an app.
The crane takes the cargo across the bay, like in real
Any other questions? Oh,
Could you foresee peer support specialists being used in adolescent addiction care, or is that happening already in some places?
So yeah, I have absolutely stayed out of that space. Just because, well, adolescence is a difficult space to be in. And I wanted to get kind of the lay of the land for peer supports in general and bust through some of those barriers before I dipped into that. But I know that I can't imagine how great it would be to be a kid and have someone support you through the process. I just haven't seen a lot of research and information about how to best utilize that and implement that, what it could look like, especially online. But I'm thinking, like, if we think about today's youth and how they love they love social media, they love, being able to utilize their phones and apps. And I just think it would be a wonderful component. I don't have enough understanding about how to successfully meet that mark, but it's on my radar for sure.
water, like this.
any other questions? Thank you very much, Dr. Mo.
Thank you.
Yeah, so we got a few more minutes until we get into the ballroom session again. So feel free to check out the exhibits or whatever you need to do.